welcome to our webinar that is entitled Planning for the New Abnormal, Positioning Your Firm for Success in 2021 and Beyond. Former professional boxer Mike Tyson is quoted saying, "Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face." And I think for most of us on the webinar today, we can all agree that 2020 has been like a huge punch in the face. We now live in a time where I think everything that we do, both in terms of planning and in execution, has to be re-examined. And that's not to say that everything in our world has necessarily changed. And that's not to say that everything will change for our planning in 2021. But it is a good opportunity, I think, in everything that we do, whether we're practitioners or whether we're advising practitioners, to take a look at our strategy and determine what from prior years is going to roll over into 2021 and continue to work successfully for us, and what really needs to be re-examined and taken a finer look at to see whether that actually services our purposes or not. We're going to have a few polls throughout the webinar, and the first one is coming up right now. We'd like to get a sense for just how much change do you think your planning will take on for 2021? And so if you'll go ahead and respond to the poll there, we'll give you some real-time result as to how much things are going to change.
Hey, Jonathan, there's a message from Lana. I just want to make sure we're good. Lana, is everything all good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, do we have a result on the poll? There we go. So it looks like it could be as much as 50%, 34% seems to be the kicker right there. Today, it's our intention to provide you with some really great ideas on things you should consider for 2021. From a business development, a marketing communications, and a PR perspective. I'd like each of the panelists to take just a brief moment and introduce themselves. Jamie, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Diafaria. I am the CEO of Infinite Global. We help professional services firms and their clients with a heavy emphasis on law firms. We help them with their communication strategies. That includes crisis and litigation, and as well as design works and a lot of content as well. Jonathan, thank you for setting this up. Happy to be here.
Thanks. Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Roberts. I am the partner and creative director of Moray Marketing Partners. We're here in Washington, D.C., where there's literally nothing going on this time of year in Washington, D.C. We specialize in law firms, but we also have two other verticals, which is associations and higher ed.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Jonathan Fitzgerald, marketing partner at Equinox Strategy Partners. We do business development, coaching, and training for service firms across the country. I was also in-house at 3 different law firms during my tenure working with professional services firms. And so I think one of the unique perspectives that I bring to the table is understanding the needs and the stresses that some of you may have working within your firm, as well as having that outside consultant's view. My colleague Lana Manganello is also with us. She's been kind enough to assist with our Q&A to make sure that all of your questions are addressed. If we can incorporate them during today's discussion, we would love to do that. Some of them we may have to follow up with you on. She's also assisting us with our polls today. At different times, we'll ask for your thoughts on specific topics and see where each of you kind of fit. the first segment that we'd like to talk about today is how each of us can really capitalize on what happens to be hot in the market. And again, whether you're a practitioner or whether you're advising practitioners, whenever there's disruption or uncertainty in the market, there are always opportunities to gain market share, to utilize new service professionals, to lean on new relationships. And so the first thing that we want to talk about is just exactly how to do that. In one of the polls that I believe you took just a little bit earlier on the call, we tried to identify where you think there is going to be a greater emphasis in your planning for next year. And as we take a look at the results, obviously business development seems to be an emphasis, as well as outbound communication with websites and blogs and social media. There's definitely no doubt that we can definitely do a better job of communicating with our target audiences. From a business development perspective, I think COVID has really highlighted the critical role of personal relationships that we have with our practitioners and that our practitioners have with the firm's clients. It's how intentional we leverage those relationships that is likely to determine how successful we are, not only for the end of this year, but also for next year. When I talk about being intentional, I'm talking specifically about our practitioners having business plans where specific individuals in their network or specific organizations are identified, both at the individual level, maybe at a practice or industry group level, maybe at an office level, definitely at a firm level, but going after specific names of people who you can leverage from a business development perspective. I think being more intentional about biz dev also incorporates the frequency of your outreach. Oftentimes in our business development coaching and training, we'll have practitioners come and say, oh, that person on my prospect list, I spoke to them a couple years ago. They know exactly what I do. We're good to go. And unfortunately, with as quickly as things move today and with as much as has changed, we've got to be in front of key contacts, in my opinion, between 8 and 10 times during the course of the year, key audiences. Those interactions have to be varied. Those interactions have to be more creative than they've been in the past. And those interactions also have to be able to address the needs of those people that we're contacting. I think being more intentional from a business development perspective also means how do we do a better job of anticipating our clients' needs? For in-house advisors, for the legal and accounting marketers that are on today's webinar, how do you do a better job of anticipating the needs of those that you serve within the firm? And how do you instruct those professionals on how to get out in front of the issues that their clients and prospects and referral sources are going to come across? If we wait for our clients to contact us, we've likely missed an opportunity. It doesn't mean that the opportunity is over altogether, but to get out in front of those issues in a variety of ways, which Jeff and Jamie will talk about here shortly, I think is one way that COVID has really changed the dynamic between the people that are in our networks. Jamie, for those of us that still have the stomach for watching the news from one day to the next, how do you think firms can do a better job of issue spotting and being part of that narrative as a way to continue to stay top of mind with key audiences?
Yeah, it's a good question. You mentioned the word intentional. I'll use the word thoughtful a lot in this, and that's the main point. The era we're in with COVID and the election and a lot of other unprecedented things clearly change the news cycle, and it changes the way that you're going to go about doing what you do. But the process that's behind it is the same as it's always been. And so what I mean by that is firms should always be looking for the next thing that their clients care about and that they should be thinking about and talking about. Right now, those things are just a little bit more obvious, but the process by which they do that, which is talking to clients, reading the room a little bit, what is it that they care about? What should they care about? That's all the same. But right now, what are our clients looking at? One is the election that's been in the news. I don't know if you've seen that. And,
I haven't.
Yeah, a guy named Kanye is running against a couple guys. So the election is an opportunity. Some people will reflexively, a lot of law firms reflexively will just not talk about it. I get it. There are some sensitivities there, but there's also a way to do it if you have a process in place and if you train the attorneys. So what does that look like? One, avoid conjecture. Give a balanced analysis. Reporters probably are looking for something a little bit different, but oftentimes they're just looking for you to explain the issues and what the possible outcomes are. They don't need you to take a side, and you certainly don't want to take a side. But the other thing is really focus on the stuff that matters to your clients. So within the rubric of the election itself, what is it that your clients are looking to hear from you? There's going to be a lot of uncertainty after this, regardless of who wins. And so you need to anticipate that. And we're talking about the next 30 days, but we're also talking about well into 2021. And the attorneys and the firms that plan ahead a little bit will be the ones that get the most ink and the most valuable ink. Other issues that are in the news, obviously the fallout from the pandemic is going to continue to be big. So we're talking about restructuring, we're talking about bankruptcy, we're talking about PE, but that's not the entire list. I mean, there are certainly things that are relevant to your attorneys and your firms that are not within that list, but that are definitely affected, and you should be thinking about those things as well. Congressional efforts to break up big tech, that could be a thing going forward. And I know there are a lot of firms that just can't talk about Google, they can't talk about Facebook. I get that, but the ones that can have a little bit of daylight. And there's also other content you can create around that. This is not necessarily a news thing, but it's something that firms should be addressing and thinking about, which is the corporate social responsibility angle, the social justice movement. There are firms that are doing a really good job of getting their message out internally and also to some extent externally. I think it's really important that these firms articulate what their culture is and what their values are in a way that they haven't done before. I'll be very candid. Previously, a lot of firms like ours were advising law firms not to talk about these issues, particularly because they just weren't very diverse. In retrospect, clearly that was horrible advice, right? And people need to be taking a stand. I think that's clear now, and firms are pivoting and adjusting. And some firms, I'll name one, Shepherd Mullen, for example, a firm that's done a really great job of communicating their values internally and externally, and they really do a nice job of walking that line. So sometimes that will seep into the public view, but other times it's just more internal, but it's certainly something they should be thinking about.
And historically, I think professional services firms, Jamie, have been a little leery about commenting on anything that could be polarizing. But it seems like our world just continues to get more polarized and polarized. And if that's the direction your firm wants to take, you're essentially going to censor yourself because there's going to be nothing you can talk about. I think what you're trying to communicate is find issues that are unique and that the firm is passionate about and that its clients are passionate about, and comment on that kind of information. And at the very least, try to be unbiased as to your approach so that what you're delivering is information. This is the pro, this is the con. I know we've got a client here on the West Coast in California. In the November election, we have a ballot measure that talks about repealing our property tax, how property taxes work in California. It's a very hot button item. And we encouraged our client to do a webinar letting voters know, if you vote yes on this prop, this is what you're voting for. If you vote no, this is the impact to you personally, to business. And I thought the firm did an excellent job of being very down the middle. Obviously, the firm's clients will follow up with the firm's attorneys that we're presenting to say, okay, thanks for that information. You know my business, you know my objectives. Now give me a little bit more opinion as to what you suggest we should do. But at least they're part of the conversation. They're not bowing out. They continue to be part of that.
Right, that's exactly right. And you're correct. Firms will run the gamut in terms of how they want to engage on these topics. I think the ones that are a little more niche have some daylight too, because they don't have as many conflicts. And they also have particular expertise that may be more readily able to talk about and target a specific group. It might be a group of 10, but they're the perfect 10, and so you can address them that way. The other thing I would stress is that the firms need to do a good job about capitalizing on this in a way that will support those efforts. So are they putting together strategic industry groups, and are they putting them on their website in a way that will support the media efforts? So credentialing them by having a place people can go and look exactly who the attorneys are in that group, have a series of content around it that's readily accessible. I know Jeff will probably talk about these things as well, but it's one thing to be out there talking about things. It's also another to drive the traffic back to the website and have a place where people can go easily to see all the content in one place.
So that brings up a good point. Jeff, anytime there's disruption or uncertainty in the market, it creates new opportunities for service professionals. A lot of the service professionals that we serve have expansive backgrounds. We can't always, as legal and accounting marketers, market everything that the practitioner is capable of doing. And so we try to align the practitioner behind a current market trend or a market need. Do you have any thoughts about how we can do a better job of repackaging our skill set to where it does meet market demands and we do create a pull for our services instead of constantly having to push ourselves onto our target audiences?
You're right, John, and Jamie, you're right. One of the things that I always say is, we remember marketing supports business development. So business development sets these objectives or sets these goals. Marketing, to be effective, needs to look at things as what we call ROO, and that's return on objectives. Give us objectives and we can give you deliverables. So when business development has these goals that are putting forth toward the team, or a press release is pushing a certain topic, then that's an objective for us as marketers to create something, right? Giving that pull or that place on the website that Jamie was mentioning. So we're seeing a lot of these landing pages. Landing pages are nothing new, but we're really seeing them pop up more. And they're going to play a bigger role going forward, especially in 2021. But a good example is landing pages based off of COVID. We're seeing a lot of firms that reacted quickly and created COVID task force. Instead of just saying these are our certain attorneys that work on this task force, they're putting together blogs or thought leadership pieces. But instead of just putting them out there, creating a landing page for this topic or these people to go to. Now, remember, a landing page needs to be focused on a particular, specific topic or a service or an expertise. It can't be something that's just so general that it loses what the user came there for. So it really has to stay on point. But there's some things
in terms of these landing pages. What's the overall strategy? Is the market more segmented, and so we as firms need to do a better job of aligning and repackaging our expertise to meet those demands, and a landing page accomplishes that, as opposed to someone landing on the law firm or the accounting firm's website, trying to figure out where they belong on that site. And that could be 5, 6, 10 clicks from the homepage, as opposed to landing on exactly what you want.
Right. Well, a landing page has to be driven. Content has to be, or users have to be driven to that. So that means we need certain links. We need referred links. We need these natural links or manually built links or these self-created links. And these now, instead of driving someone to the home page, the press release or any type of sponsorship that you're doing will drive to this landing page. That way it stays a lot more on message. So you're absolutely right. You're not going to find it from the homepage unless there's a link to it. But really, to be effective, it needs to be really designed for the scanning reader with these keywords. It needs to make sure that the information can be accessed quickly. And then you also have to have a benefit. And there's no purpose in having a landing page if there's no goal. So you've got to ask yourself, what's the goal of this, putting this all together? Is it just showing that we have experts, showing that we're smart in this area? Or are you really trying to lead them to say that we've started a whole new practice from this, or this is this opportunity that was created, so now what are we going to do with it? So I think a lot of times some landing pages fall flat for that is because it's quickly, let's get something together, let's put something up, but not really looking for by demonstrating the benefit or looking for the overall goal. You've got to give the reason why the client or the perspective has come there, because you want to make sure that it's worth their investment or you're worth their investment.
Great. And Jamie, from a PR perspective, how are you seeing firms repositioning their experts?
Well, they're doing the right thing, and some of them are doing it with different speed. And the speed element is something that Jeff, you mentioned, and it's really critical because as anybody who's worked in the legal industry knows, the minute a firm does something, then all 1,000 of the others do the same thing. So it's important to be out there first and get some of that space. But some of our clients are repositioning practice groups. They are creating things like strategic opportunities practices around distressed assets, some real estate groups. So they are taking the time to look at their assets, and I'll call the attorney's assets, and figure out what their particular expertise is and how that lends itself to the current environment. And then they are repositioning those. And like I said, you can use that in a variety of ways. But one is to just make it easier for your clients to understand what it is you offer and understand the media as well.
One of the things that Jeff mentioned along the lines that I think is key to remind people is the timeliness of this repackaging. You can't wait until 10 of your competitors have done what you were supposed to do, hopefully, leading the charge. We've got clients that have formed, landing pages or groups around the wildfires that are affecting a lot of the nation, around COVID, around bankruptcy or insolvency issues. But, as they're trend spotting and looking out 3 months, 6 months, 9 months from now, they're having conversations internally to say, what are our clients? What are our prospects? What is the market going to be dealing with? And then they look reflectively and they say, what kind of expertise do we have internally to meet this demand? Maybe it's not a demand right now, but hopefully it's not a demand right now, so that you as legal and accounting marketers and also as practitioners have a little bit of ramp up time to get the thought leadership together, to understand what your position is going to be, to realize which part of the equation you're going to represent. But it does have to be done timely. Otherwise, you're not going to be the first or second to market, and other people are going to be able to take market share as a result.
And Jonathan, I can give you an example. I think that's pretty relevant, and I use it a lot because it was textbook. We had a client that catered to the high net worth space, and they in March identified the fact that the $5 million wealth tax exemption was going to be going off the books in December or at the end of the year. So starting in March, we developed a full campaign that ran the entire year, and we had it all mapped out in terms of the kinds of publications we were going after, the messaging, et cetera. It culminated in a number of placements, but the big one was at the end of the year, a New York Times above the fold with a picture story about how this was going to be taking place. And our law firm client was prominently featured, all because the firm went through the process of identifying something that was happening in the future, having the wherewithal to put all the messaging together and then execute on it. That process can be replicated now in so many ways and should be.
Excellent. I think for the marketers on the webinar today too, a lot of times our practitioners need an environment where we can brainstorm all of this. None of us should feel the stress of coming up with all of these brilliant ideas on our own. And I know for the many years that I was in-house, sometimes year end was always super stressful for me because I felt like I had to come up with something brilliant that was different for the following year, that my practitioners would see as Jonathan paying attention, Jonathan staying ahead of it, Jonathan really looking out for us. But I was also glad to realize at some point that it wasn't always dependent on me. Reach out to colleagues in the profession. Reach out to some of the service providers that service your firm or that you've met through networking, and share this responsibility of, here's what I'm working with. Here's what I think the opportunity is. How can we formalize it? Those are conversations you can have internally at the firm. Those are conversations you can have externally. It's not always your idea to come up with the next NASA level idea. I do think it's your responsibility, though, to initiate the process and get all of the different people that should be involved. That takes us to the second segment that I'd like to discuss today on the webinar. We talked a little bit earlier about trying to create a draw so that your clients and your prospects and your referral sources are coming to you versus you constantly having to go to them. And Jeff, with more and more people working remotely, And I think generally on the web more often, it seems like, I see way more people on LinkedIn. I see way more people on social media. My emails seem to get read a lot quicker than others. People respond to invitations for like this webinar much quicker than they ever have before. Give us a little bit of a high level sense of how does search engine optimization and search engine management, SEO and SEM, really fold into the overall strategy of what we should be thinking about for next year?
Well, I think one thing that we know a lot of times, and analytics are important, and I know everyone has analytics on all of their websites. But are you reading them? Are you reacting to them? Are
No.
this information giving you right?
The answer is no.
Like, what are we doing with all this data? So there was one thing that will never change, really, in the legal profession is that the analytics will always push you to the attorney's profile. That's going to be your number one search. That's what's always driven. We try really hard to get you to read the thought leadership. We try really hard to get you to read about our practices. But in reality, by far, the drive is the attorney bios. So we're paying more and more attention then to, what people are searching for and how can we get them to go to other pages. So looking at those analytics are going to be important. And the reason why they're important is because Google is planning a bigger change coming in the next year or in 2021. They're going to give us a heads up. So no need to panic. It's supposedly a 6 months heads up, but they're doing this thing called the Google Page Experience Update. That's the fancy word for it, the big word for it. But what these are is paying more attention to what we call core web vitals. Core web vitals are like, your HTTPS, which we've always done. We're making things more friendly, more pop-ups or less pop-ups, sorry, and safe browsing. Well, what they're going to do is take all these core vitals and put them together in what they're calling the user experience. We push user experience a lot, and now that's actually going to reflect in these SEO or the search engine optimization rankings. It's not happening now, but it will happen within the next 6 months to a year, especially by mid 2021. So this gives us time to look at our website, to look at the user experience, to make sure that it's going to follow the loading speed. As our page is loading too quick, too long, well, that's going to hurt you. The interactivity, and of course, the stability of your content or the qualifications of your content. Is it legitimate? As you're seeing now, a lot, you mentioned big tech and what are they now controlling content? Are they giving rankings to content? Are they telling us what is real content and what isn't content? Well, that's going to now start playing a big part. So having your content shared through other resources, and Jamie, this is what you mentioned earlier, having other sources and recognized sources promote your content is really going to help your website out a lot, not just that particular article, but your website in general.
So what I'm hearing, Jeff, is not only is the content that we create and the way we position that content critical to make sure that the right messages are being shared, but even if our role doesn't include anything to do with SEO or SEM, we should also realize that the vehicle by which people are getting to our attorneys or to our accountants or to our professionals, in some cases can be just as key. Who cares if you've got a brilliant tax person or a brilliant insolvency person if that target audience can never find them on your firm website, or there's nothing that ever draws them to what you've got going on? Jamie, how about for you? Other ideas in terms of creating that draw?
Yeah, and it's been the year of content. So, COVID has created many problems. It's created many opportunities too. And we don't talk about the positive sides of COVID because there's probably only one, but content is one of them. And so people are being more thoughtful about the kind of content they're putting out. And it's really because there's the options are reduced in light of COVID. The number of events you can go to, for example, have diminished, obviously. So people are spending more time on the content they create. So I think they're being a little bit more thoughtful about what that looks like so that you're not just flooding boxes with nonsense. One thing that we recommend is what my head of digital calls content archaeology. So you've got new content you can create, but there's also a host of other content you've already created that you can tweak a little bit. You can add some keywords, update it for the current times, and repurpose that, put it out on social media, and just make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. But the key is to, as always, find out what your audience cares about and stay a step ahead of them. Put together content that can be used in a multi-channel way. So you don't just put it out on LinkedIn. You go to where your audience is and make sure that the content is drawing them back to the site.
We talked a little bit about a little earlier in the webinar about polarizing topics. Jamie, what are you seeing firms doing in terms of the social justice movement to not only participate and be part of the solution, but to also educate their target audience on the fact that they are one of the major players within whatever the topic is, and they get the benefit of that?
Yeah, and like I said earlier, firms have in the past probably not handled this the way they should have. They got bad advice from all of us, candidly, and I think now people are taking the time to address social justice movement in a different way. Morrison & Foerster, MoFo, is an example of a firm that's put together a really nice podcast series around this subject, and they've always been ahead of the curve a little bit when it comes to these kinds of things, so it fits in with their culture. But that's something that's been really effective for them. It conveys who they are, what they stand for. Other firms have the opportunity to do the same thing in a different way. You can be a little bit creative about how you convey that, but the main thing is it should match up with your culture. It should express your values. The audiences you're going after, if you think about it, probably less so the media in that particular case, but more recruits, the folks internally, so you retain them, and just it's generally GCs who really care about these things. So it's really important that you can do that, and now you've got the vehicles to do it in a way that's really creative and different.
We're interested in how active each of your firms are in terms of outbound communication on social justice issues. Lana, will you put up our next poll that just gives us a sense for, based on your firm's website and outbound public communications, how involved is it in these social justice causes? We'll give you a second to respond. Lana, will you give us the results and let's see how we did? That seems almost the exact opposite of whatever I would have expected going into this.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the result of this poll, Jamie or Jeff?
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. It's a little, I don't want to use the word disappointing, but I think it's perhaps not surprising given the conservative nature of the industry. It means there's room for improvement. And maybe if the firms that are in the not really category or the ones that stay away, if they can look at some examples of firms that are doing it in a way that is effective and is not scary to them, then perhaps they can see that there is a way forward to do this in an effective and genuine way.
Great.
And based off of what Jamie said earlier at the starting of this, you know, if more people advise them to do it, then maybe they will. So there are probably a lot that are too scared, you know, like you said, in that lower, not really, or stay far away. Maybe if the other firms did, they would follow.
They're either scared or maybe they don't have people advising them on how their firm culture and values can be communicated in a way where they support those causes. I mean, it may just be, hey, we don't really know how to set all this up. Yeah. And it's through using outside resources or getting a committee or something together within the firm that can make more of that come to life.
Yeah, I think what you've got is a lot of the old thinking, candidly. And so historically, there's been some trepidation around this because the numbers aren't good. And so firms whose numbers aren't good, which is most of the industry, have historically said, well, I don't have anything to talk about here, so I'm not going to. And then on top of that, I hate to name names, but you've got people like Vivia Chen who write articles that call out firms very directly. And so I think a lot of folks are trying to stay under the radar and off of her lists. And so that's probably some of the thinking, if I had to guess.
One of the questions that we have in the Q&A right now centers around video bursts. Jeff, is that something like the effectiveness of video bursts now that people are at home and online more often? Are those effective? How should firms be utilizing those to their advantage?
Yeah, video bursts and or snippets, I guess what they could call them, or shorter. And I think people are going to be reacting faster or a little more friendlier if it is of a burst and not necessarily a longer video for people to watch. And I think if that's what they're asking, but I think it's a good question. You are seeing more and more video, but the video does have to be shorter and it has to really hit that content quicker.
Well, it goes both ways, though. I mean, there is short form that is, as you said, a minute is probably great. Then you've got the longer form stuff that is also still effective. Podcasts that are up to 30 minutes are being consumed pretty voraciously at the moment. And so it always comes down to the interest level of the content itself. If you're
it'll be interesting to see how that changes based off of the Zoom fatigue, right?
Right.
So how will people look at your videos later compared to what they have been looking at in the past? And do they have the time and do they want to stand more in front of the computer? So it's too soon to tell, but I guess we can anticipate that there will be some sort of effect of this.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd also add is that you have to consider the fact that there is a huge audience out there that consumes information completely differently, and you've got a ton of tools at your disposal, and so you should use all of them and make sure you've got the metrics in place to see what's working, so you don't waste your time on one and to the detriment of another.
Jamie, how long do you generally advise people to track analytics before they change course?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a set number. You definitely should give it a little bit of time, but there's two aspects to that. There's the data, which tells you a story, and then you can tweak things. Perhaps it's not so much that people aren't reading your blogs, it's that the headlines are off or that you're not using the right keywords or things like that. So sometimes you want to tweak things a little bit and then see if it's still not working. But the other thing is talk to your clients. You should be on the phone with them periodically anyway. And so as part of that, how do you want to get your information? What do you want to see? In what form? What would be most relevant to you, et cetera? So it should be part of a conversation as well as data.
When in doubt, ask.
Yeah.
Jeff, in terms of, we're talking about SEO, we're talking about creating a poll. We've also talked a little bit about how the major search engines work, how the algorithms change. Just about the time we think we've cracked the code, now all of a sudden Google flips the script and we're back to square one trying to figure out how we can maximize it. In terms of user experience or brand experience between our firms and the major search engines, is there anything that you can share with the group that we should be thinking about for next year?
Well, there is something that what Google calls EAT, E-A-T, that's expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. This is something that they're going to be look at. This algorithm started like last year, maybe even a year or two ago. These become a part of what they call signals. The signals are going to become more and more important. What this EAT or this expertise, authority, and trustworthiness is, this is another part of this algorithm and this ranking, and this is going to be based off of your domain level keywords. So for your practice area descriptions or your industry descriptions or even your bios, how media and press are used and how it's linked to and what type of authority is that giving to. And then of course your social metrics, which we mentioned earlier, landing page activity or your social media. How are things driven to it? And that gives you trustworthiness. So yeah, they are going to rank this. They call this brand strength. That's one of the words that they're using. It's going to be really important on how your brand strength, I mean, the word brand keeps stretching and meaning different things in different industries, but in the brand strength of a website is going to be really important based off of what Google calls EAT, E-A-T. So it's something that marketing team should probably look at, and you can actually do web, you can look at your website now or have someone crawl it and see what type of authority or EAT that it has now.
It sounds like Google is wanting there to be more collaboration and more third-party credibility points so that firms aren't just positioning certain professionals and saying, this is the end all be all in this practice area. But as long as the business community also supports that claim, then your EAT
Yes.
score is likely to be stronger, and you're likely to be seen as more of the go-to person if not only your organization, but everyone else in your ecosphere also agrees to that.
Yeah, and this gets back, I think, what you mentioned earlier is reaching out to your source or income again.
This collaboration with the business community at large is all something that we've been coaching on from a business development perspective. Lawyers and accountants and service professionals in general are great about speaking and writing and doing all of these other thought leadership by themselves. Then it seems like for the last 10 years, people are now open-minded to what we're advising now is utilize the strength of your network. Find that prospect that wants to participate on a thought leadership piece with you. Explore the opportunity of putting it together, building the relationship, and then delivering it, and then deciding, what do you do with it now that you got the article? What do you do with it now that you have the webinar? Hopefully everyone who has participated is promoting it to their network so that not only does your network as a participant see it, but you also get a rise from others participating, sharing it with their network. So it could be articles, it could be webinars, it could be videos. These are all great ways of collaborating with current clients in hopes of expanding the relationship. It could be prospects who, you know, through the creation of these thought leadership pieces, you develop a relationship, and now all of a sudden they're like, wow, Jamie and Jeff are great to work with. I should really think about them when I've got this next challenge. I think there's also an opportunity, and sometimes we miss it, and sometimes as we're advising our clients as in-house advisors, we miss it. Don't only look at the contacts that are right under your nose. Some of us serve on boards. There are relationships there to leverage. Some of us serve on nonprofits. Some of us serve in associations. Some of us are part of hobby groups, book clubs, surfer groups, classic car groups, cigar clubs. I mean, the hobbies go on and on and on. And even though professionals within each of those different areas may not be current clients or current referral sources, they still have networks of their own. They may not be the end user that hires you or refers you work. It may be someone that they connect you with in their network that ends up bringing that next matter to your practice. And so this idea of collaboration, it sounds to me like not only works from an SEO and an SEM perspective, and Google and the other major search engines are thinking very highly about that kind of stuff, but it also works to kind of bring some variety in the promotional things that practitioners do and that we advise practitioners to do. Someone mentioned a little bit earlier this idea of Zoom gloom. For those of us that spend a lot of time on video chats, Jamie, do you have any suggestions for Zoom exhaustion? Do we continue to just promote webinars and to promote Zoom meetings and all of this kind of stuff, even though we know that the fatigue exists because we want as close to an in-person interaction? Or do you have other ideas?
Well, first of all, you have to know your audience, right? And so just to give a quick example, I have a client that just not standing on Zoom. She never has from the beginning. So trust me, I don't schedule Zoom calls with her. I don't think the vehicle is the issue so much. In fact, I'm one of the people that loves Zoom because I like to be able to see the person versus just hear them. Clearly, I'm not necessarily in the majority, but I wouldn't say it's the vehicle that's the issue. It's probably the content that sometimes is the problem. So I wouldn't say that Zoom is the problem. I wouldn't say blogs are the problem. It's making sure that the content is interesting. I think if the content's interesting, if you've got, to your point, Jonathan, a really nice mix of people who are presenting something that is a little different than what they've heard before, then I don't think people are going to be worried so much about the Zoom portion of it. But that said, let's be honest, we've been doing this now for 6 months plus. You should move it around a little bit, try different things out. And it's like capitalism. The market will tell you whether it's working or not, right?
Yep, excellent. Jeff, anything to add to Zoom gloom, or have we pretty much covered it?
Well, I think, maybe the Zoom meetings go on too long, so I think if you do, and I think if anybody who's listening has ever, worked with Jonathan before, Jonathan is great at doing what I guess government term would be called BLOT, B-L-O-T, bottom line on top, is to get to the bottom line first and to talk, to that point. There's nothing wrong with socializing, but get to the point, find out what you need, and maybe we shorten the Zoom calls to knock down some of these Zoom zombies, I guess.
The other
Yeah,
thing oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in terms of the takeaways from COVID, right? I think some good things have come out of it. Is there's been a return to fundamentals in some respects, and like you said at the beginning, people are now calling their clients. They're having more conversations. We're actually seeing folks when we do Zoom calls in their home. There's a personal side to this. All the things that we should have been doing before, and so it is now actually forcing those habits. So I don't think we should forget that element of it.
The other thing that we've been advising our clients too is they're proactively reaching out to people in their network. Give those people an option and let them choose their own adventure. If your outreach is about connecting, do you want to jump on a call? Do you want to jump on a Zoom? Do you want to meet at a local cafe that has some outdoor space where we're safe and we're measured and everyone is doing what they're supposed to? And let the other person that you're trying to connect with decide on what works for them. If they're still not comfortable with something in person, albeit outside, then they may say, hey, let's jump on a Zoom. Here are my credentials. But at least you're not forcing people or making the assumption that Jeff or Jamie only want to do it this way, but you're letting them choose their own adventure. The third segment that I'd like to finish with for today's webinar revolves around what changes have come about as a result of COVID that we may need to take a little bit closer look at for 2021. And Jamie, I know that tons of firms are involved in big events and conferences and sponsorships and all these different ways of staying top of mind with their targets. Can you share any other creative ideas that perhaps marketers or practitioners should consider as they're looking for new and creative ways of connecting next year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the in-person events where networking is the primary goal, they're just not existing right now, right? So I think if firms are smart, they're looking at those that they've historically done and questioning the value of those. But on the flip side, how do you get that same effect without being able to be there in person? We have some clients, one client, for example, that I think it's 6 years, a book comes out that they are part of. It's in the art law industry. And so historically, they've done a big event around that, usually at a museum. Obviously, that can't happen this year. So how do they get the same bang for their buck? They are talking, I believe, about renting out the space, doing a virtual event in the same space. So you get some of the benefits of it, obviously not the same, but you're going to have to get creative. And I think this is where the folks that are on this call, not us, but the ones listening, have an opportunity to think a little differently and use some of those other skills. And you talk about other industries. We don't often look to the outside. A lot of law firms like to look at what's going on in the legal industry. Well, let's take some ideas from the consumer market. Let's take some ideas from management consulting firms and not just rely on what we've always done. It's an opportunity to start fresh with some of these thoughts.
We have a client that has an annual partner retreat like many firms do, and they wanted to continue this year during COVID. And one of the things they shared with us from a social perspective to get people talking and networking, this is all done virtually, by the way, they found some company that does essentially a murder mystery dinner, but virtually. Now, I haven't attended it. I don't exactly know how they're going to pull that off. I have no idea what the rubber chicken's going to taste like, but that element of getting creative and trying to do your best to be proactive about continuing to get people together, putting your head in the sand and waiting for COVID to pass, I think is a horrible strategy. And although the murder mystery dinner may not be appropriate for everyone out there, the point is get creative about it. Find out what your firm will bite off. Find out you know, what seems interesting to you. And if it's interesting to you, it's likely going to be interesting to the people that you serve. Another topic which may be a little taboo for particularly those of us on the call that are consultants, and I'm going to pitch it to Jeff because he's the best at these types of hard-hitting questions. What are you seeing in terms of budgets, marketing and business development, PR budgets being reduced, either toward the end of this year or for the beginning of next year? Are firms pulling back? Are they seeing the advantage and doubling down? Are they not doing things in terms of sponsorship and events that cost a lot of money? And so as a result, they've got a little bit of a pot of honey that they're looking to spend for next year. Give us a little bit of insight on budgets.
Yeah, well, that's a good question because it obviously depends on your industry on how the budgets are affected. You know, I mentioned at the start that we work with higher ed. You know, they had to change how they go on campus and recruit. They had to no longer do commencements. So, you know, these type of money, this budget, they look at it, what are we going to do now? How do we spend this money that's there? And now even having on-campus classes. So those type of industries do change. The ones that probably affect the legal market is probably the sponsorships and the events more than any. And of course, going out and meeting clients in person. So one of the things that we always fight for, and we tell this to all the marketers, is don't cut your budget in a recession, but just change how you spend it. And the reason you say that is we know once it's cut, it's going to be almost impossible to get it back. And if you do get it back, it could take you a couple of years before you see, because you're not going to say, all right, well, you cut all my money, I'm not going to deliver you with any more services. You can't do that. You're going to try really hard to give them this better service or great service with less of a budget. And I don't know if I was in a partner position, I'd probably say, well, great, why did I need to spend that to begin with if I'm getting the same results? So
here's the question though, Jeff. Here's the question that we as in-house people have to deal with, because I've been in that position before. Your marketing partner or your managing partner or someone who you report to, your CMO, CBDO, comes to you and says, Jeff, the board has asked us to reduce our marketing budget by 25%. What are your recommendations? So they don't like approach you as though, hey, do you feel like cutting it or not? You're almost given a mandate. So knowing that that's how many of us get approached with this taboo issue, how do you kind of squirm around that to where you're still providing a ton of value, but like you said, anything that they cut is so hard to get back in subsequent years.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the greatest values that marketers can do during a downturn is identifying these opportunities and capitalizing on them. So let's look at some opportunities that are out there. And I would first present by saying, hey, I know that we've got to cut, but what if, right? Bring some what ifs to them. What if I was able to next year get them to throw in a sponsorship if we don't cut now? Or if we do cut, what if I get 2 for the price of 1? What if I add placements? Well, I can, you know, we were a silver sponsor. They're going to make us a platinum sponsor. And I went ahead and negotiated next year. These type of things, bring the what ifs first and say, maybe we're cutting that budget 25% this year. Are we going to get it back next year? If it is, because I need to know, because I'm already working on 2021 budgets, or I'm working on the next ones. It's good to ask and bring what ifs.
So in other words, if you're on the receiving end of that message, don't all of a sudden expect that you've got to go to work for that 25% reduction. You want to hold on to that baby as much as you can. So figure out creative ways of getting more for the money and pitching that as a what if or as a silver lining rather than, oh my God, the world's falling in. Jamie.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say too, that's an opportunity to look at that marketing funnel, right? Or the sales funnel, right? If the top part is the branding and the positioning, and the very bottom of the funnel is the closing, a lot of the times it's all go right back to, well, we need more closing, we need more business, and they forget the top part. So as a marketer, we really have to fight for that top and even the middle part of that marketing funnel in order for the business development to close on the bottom.
Yeah, and I'll go back to the example we mentioned earlier, which all these conferences that law firms typically send people to. And a lot of times, I'm sure people can relate to this. It's an attorney who says, I need to be at this event, never looking at whether there's ever been a client that's come from that, never having an approach to generate business when they're there. So all those things that are now not happening, perhaps they can reevaluate that process in the meantime and use that money that they're saving there to focus on the stuff that actually works. I mean, everybody that's on this call right now has a way of demonstrating return on investment. They're not doing the same thing with those conferences. And since they don't exist, there's some freed up money.
Yeah, good point. With the
Yeah.
couple minutes that we have left on the webinar, folks, Jeff, can we start with you? And if you can encapsulate our discussion today and give kind of one thing to focus on or one thing to take away, what would that be?
I like where this was going with reaching out to your sources. I love that idea. And how do we use those sources to push back to our to push to our website? Well, we can do this. You know, we mentioned the landing pages, but a lot of times people forget are the email signatures. Many of our clients use their email signatures to promote themselves or the firm within a ward. Why not use that better or smarter by talking about a press release that just happened or a thought leadership piece? Now, I know that a lot of times, you know, emails are driven by a bigger machine, so you don't have that flexibility to change. But even on your own, why not? Why not put that at your bottom? And if it's not a signature, create your own little signature and promote something. So I love reaching out to sources. And I think people, you know, Jonathan, people probably even asked you, you know, how can we promote thought leadership better or more? I would say, you know, promote it for those email signatures or create, reach out to those, you know, reliable sources and say, hey, how about doing me a favor? Why not?
Yeah, excellent. Jamie, your takeaway?
Yeah, this is not business as usual. We've got obviously a very different time. I still think the processes are the same as they've always been, but the issues that people should be talking about, the audiences you're going after, those are all things that you should spend a lot of time now for 2021, identifying who you're going after, what kind of content they are going to want to get from us, and then building plans around all of those for the attorneys that are going to be part of the program to represent the firm. I think that focus on audience is going to be really critical now because of the circumstances we're in.
Great. And I think my takeaway is whether you're the advisor to the practitioner or to the practitioner, I can't say enough about being proactive about reaching out, being proactive about staying in contact, being proactive about anticipating people's needs and getting to them before they get to you. It sends such a tremendous message that you're thinking about them, you care about them, and even if them don't have anything for you right now, when things do open up, you're going to be top of mind because you've been in contact, you've kept the relationship warm. So gentlemen, thank you for your input today. I will leave the webinar because we are at time with a quote from Marilyn Monroe that I think really nicely encapsulates it. And she said, "Within crisis are the seeds to opportunity." And I think that's exactly what we're dealing with here. If we want to be scared and we want to put our head in the sand and wait for COVID to pass, we're going to be in a worse position in the future than if we take a look at the situation, we take a look at the leverage and the assets that we have at our firm and our organizations and say, okay, what can we reposition? What can we bite off? And how can we be more proactive? Thank you for your time. And we look forward to having you at one of our next webinars.
Thanks, everybody.